My name is Jeff Dill. I am the founder and CEO of Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance.
Can you tell me a little bit about your journey into becoming a firefighter?
I've done so many things in my life. I always had a full-time job. My wife and I got married in 1980, and we had daughters at 82 and 84. But so I always had a full-time job, but I did so many different things. Part-time wise, I worked for a minor league ball club, the Baltimore Orioles. Then I worked, in broadcasting and radio. I worked part-time on the PGA Tour. So I've done so many things, in my life. And then my father-in-law and we built our house out in Gilbert's, Illinois, in 1986, and moved in '87. And a neighbor next door walked over, a little while later and said, "Hey, we're looking for some volunteer firefighters for Rutland Dundee." And I said, "Well, I'm busy. I got my full-time job. I'm doing the broadcasting. I'll think about it." Well, I finally got involved in around 1990, and right then and there, I knew that this is what I want to do. So I went through EMT and paramedic class. Officer, I moved up to a lieutenant pretty quickly. And then in 1995, Palatine Rural Fire Protection, which is now Inverness Fire Protection District, was founded. And at the age of 33, I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. And I was fortunate to be one of the founding members. So, and just moved on from there. I moved up pretty quickly to a lieutenant, to captain, to battalion chief, to assistant chief, and then I retired as a captain. I asked to go back to my tested position so I could do my work with Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance (FBHA), and I retired in 2015, and currently I'm the behavioral health administrator for Las Vegas Fire and Rescue.
What inspired you to create your organization?
Well, it was actually Hurricane Katrina. The year 2005, I was a battalion chief in Division One outside Chicago, sent down numerous firefighters to help out our brothers and sisters. And when they came back, they were showing me pictures, and they were picking up bodies in the street and the animals that littered the landscape, the devastation. And so they went to their employee system program counselors, good people, but this is 2005, and we didn't talk about behavioral health at all in our past. So I thought, well, how can I give back to my brothers and sisters? I decided to go after my master's degree, and I became a licensed counselor. And in 2009, I founded Counseling Services for Firefighters. And I was training counselors and chaplains across the U.S. Say, you want to work with us, you need to understand us. We're a little different. Not that it's wrong, but we're a little different. When in 2010, I started receiving emails and phone calls from all over the world saying, "Do you do anything about firefighter suicides?" And so I contacted all the major players, the United States Fire Administration, the NFPA, the NVFC, the IFF, the NFF. No one kept any data on our brothers and sisters that took their lives. So in 2010, my wife of 42 years now, we founded FBHA, and we had three goals: educational workshops. We have 8 now. We have a scholarship program for families, children wanting to go to school. And then our most endearing is called Those Left Behind. It's our annual weekend retreat for family survivors. And so we'll be coming up with our 9th one. It's always held in the 3rd week of May, and families from all over the country gather together to bond because they have one thing in common. They lost a loved one to suicide that was either a fire, EMS, or dispatcher. And then on that Friday night, the 3rd Friday of May, we hold a nationwide, what we call We Remember. And with that, we go down to the local fire station. This year, we'll be in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And I already have it arranged with the chief. And about 8:45, we go live on Facebook, so people across the country can watch us, across the world actually. And I do a little speech, and then we pan the families. They hold pictures of their loved ones and say their name. And then at 9 o'clock, local time, the rigs are run their lights for one moment to say we remember our fallen brothers and sisters. And we have hundreds and hundreds of organizations across the U.S. and Canada that join us. So it's been one heck of a journey. There's no doubt about it.
So I talk to quite a few firefighters, and a lot of them say they had to basically split their life of family life and firefighter life. And
Right.
then it was just tough balancing both them. How important is it for firefighters to be more open with their mental health?
It's absolutely imperative. When we look at the data, and I have validated 1,824 of these tragic events, and we estimate about a 65% reporting. And I have personally spoken to about 1,790 chief officers to validate all the data or family members. And we know that unknown is the number one known reason for my brothers and sisters taking their lives. What we do know is the number one is relationship issues, whether it's spouse or partner, children, family, or work relationship issues. And so it's absolutely imperative that we start to talk about the things that bother us, both, what's currently happening on the job or things that happened, as we were growing up, and past traumas that occur within our lives. And we promote people to do an internal size up. It's a phrase I coined way back in 2012, and what that means is we need to ask ourselves two questions every day. Why am I acting this way? Why am I feeling this way? And the best thing that we can do is to listen to others, because they see us better than we will ever see ourselves. And it's important that we get that way, because we don't want to get to that cognitive disconnect, is the phrase I use, which means that we base decisions on the emotions we're going through at that moment, and reality goes out the window. And so, whether it's anger or jealousy, guilt, whatever that emotion is, that impulse to end their lives or make bad decisions, whether drunk driving or something, it's just we need to do that internal size up prior to that cognitive disconnect.
With your experience as a firefighter, do other firefighters who talk to you, do they feel more comfortable?
Absolutely. And, it goes all the way back to, I remember we were out in California and doing some workshops for a pretty good sized city. And I was at the front door, greeting people as they came into the workshop. And I remember some old salty firefighter said, "Oh, yeah, what organization are you from?" I said, "Well, I'm a battalion chief from a fire department outside Chicago." "Oh, you're one of us." And it is amazing, because I mean, you wouldn't go to a cardiologist for a knee issue, even though they're
Right.
doctors. So it's been an eye opener at how people will open up to me, because of the 26 years I've had the job and doing what I do now. And so it means a lot too. And what we're seeing also, though, Michael, is that more and more counselors are becoming culturally competent in understanding our world. So I would say the two greatest advancements since I started in 2010 have been the development of peer support teams and counselors that are starting to understand. The National Volunteer Fire Council, we teamed up with them 3 years ago to create a national directory of behavioral health counselors. And so we have now vetted, close to 450, 500 counselors across the US that work with first responders. And yet we still need hundreds and hundreds and
Right.
hundreds of more.
Are you seeing the stigma loosen a little bit in the past few years?
No, absolutely. We have more and more of our brothers and sisters standing up and saying, "Hey, if I struggle with depression or addictions or PTS, then chances are you new people, you might experience that in your career." So they're not only being leaders in their experience of fireground and fire activities, but they now are taking the attitude of behavioral health is just as important in our world. And you see conferences time and time again where there are speakers talking about especially post-traumatic stress. And yet I think at times that limits us, because we know that the number one known reason is relationships, and followed by depression, and then PTS. And I don't see too many people talking about legal or financial or medical or physical depression or relationships at these conferences. So until we open up and talk about all these issues, will we truly move forward in understanding behavioral health within our culture.
So if few years ago, I was diagnosed with a bipolar 2, and I didn't know a whole lot of people with it. So I didn't have anyone to talk to and all that. Is it important to have other firefighters just talk to each other and know they're not alone?
And that's the basic premise of what peer support teams really are, is that they can sit and talk on the bay floor with a brother or sister and talk about issues because, you mentioned bipolar, you mentioned depression,
Yeah.
whatever's out in America, we have in the fire service. And we need to let people know that it's okay to talk about these to other people and not to keep it in and not to feel like you're going to get fired or something. And that's the same thing with post-traumatic stress. I don't want my brothers and sisters to be afraid of four little letters. I want you to understand it. I want you that if you go to a counselor, what they're looking for, whether it's depression, bipolar, we want you to have an understanding of what that does for you, and that it's okay to talk about it.
For you, how does it feel that you are having an impact in these firefighters' lives just by talking to them?
It's a lot of people ask, how are you doing, Jeff? How are you handling it? And I say, well, it's tough because, all the suicides and the people that
Right.
call me, and there's just so many organizations out there doing great work, and yet we still are losing people. And I tell them that, hey, you know what, the, we'll always know the ones that we lose, but we'll never know the ones that we save.
Right.
And it's that we just have to constantly keep on going after it, keep on talking about it, bring resources that are available to people. And a lot of people say, well, Jeff, what do you do to take care of yourself? Well, with the last name of Dill, I play a lot of pickleball, and that's my therapy. So, I'm playing 10, 12 hours. I get into tournaments just to relax and separate myself from those stressful times when I come home from work, or when people call me asking for help, or when I have to validate suicides. I've already validated 6 for 2023 already, and we
Oh,
estimate, like I
wow.
said, a 65% reporting. We track career, volunteer, wildland, military, fire, as well as EMS and dispatchers. So you can see we draw from a very big pool of those that are struggling from, and the fire service and EMS world and dispatcher. It's a lot different than what we experienced in the 90s. Starting in our career, I think we started seeing it with the Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah.
And then you started seeing the Columbine and the school shootings. And now, I mean, mass shootings are almost sometimes a daily occurrence. I mean, just look what's happened in California the last couple of
Yeah.
days. You have an 11 victim massacre, and then just yesterday or so, 7 additional. And yeah, it's everywhere. And the stress of the job is just increased due to mass casualty incidents. You talk about COVID, you talk about riots and politics and things, and it's just people are affected by it, whether in the fire service or in society, and people are angry, and so we see so much more anger. I mean, have you ever seen so many fights on an airplane? I mean, it's just it's
Yeah.
just incredible what's out there, and our brothers and sisters are responding to these calls, and it becomes very difficult.
What advice would you give the families of firefighters to help out?
We created a workshop called "Saving Those Who Save Others," the family edition,
Yeah.
and it was based on many years ago that we started seeing relationships were a big issue for so many families in the first responder world. We tell them, I said, you need to understand and learn what our world's about, and to get involved, to start auxiliary teams within the fire department, so that you can connect with other families and you have somewhere to talk. But also, one thing we talk about, that internal size up, that is something that you can do with a loved one that's a first responder. At the end of the day, you just take a pad and pencil, and each write down what emotions you went through that day, how it played out, and how it affected your family and your children at home. This starts to begin a bond, communications, and I tell them start doing this because long after you retire and the phone calls start dropping from the people that the brothers and sisters you work with, it's nice to have that connection with your loved one to walk through retirement with. And we know that 60 to 65% in our world are go through a divorce. And so the relationship issue is imperative in the first responder world. And you do that by talking. Everyone uses the word resiliency, and we know resiliency, and it's important. But for us, resiliency really means, hey, talk about the things that bother you, and don't bury what burdens you. And so communications is absolutely imperative in relationships.
What motivates you?
I think what motivates me is, like just this past weekend, I was teaching in the Midwest, and a captain came up to me and said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't." And he said, "Well, I was in a tight spot, emotionally, and my chief contacted you, and you found a counselor for me, and I went to that counselor, and it changed my life." And he gives me a big hug, and it's those things. Or I was at a place 2 weeks ago, and I could just tell there was a firefighter struggling through our workshop, and I have that. Many people have mechanical aptitude, math aptitude. Mine is the ability to read people. And so I just could tell this firefighter was struggling, and we were fortunate to have someone in the workshop who was very good in that area of with counselors and chaplains. And so during the break, I asked this person to speak to this firefighter, and later that afternoon, he was in inpatient. I think maybe it was the next day. The next day, he was in inpatient for his help, and so it's those things. Because he said during the break, he told this resource that yes, I need help, and just him sitting through that workshop, he probably thought, what, I do need some help, and I'm going to ask for it. So those type of things inspire me, and yet, like I said, the losses that we have, it's very difficult. And the stories that I've heard and the families that I've met, the hundreds and families, and when you lose someone to a vehicle accident or disease, tragic as that is, there's some understanding. But for these families and friends, uh, they're at a loss. They just don't understand what happened and why their loved one didn't ask for help, or even if they did, and they still ended up taking their lives. So it's a 50-50. But my bride, like I said, we've been married 42 years. She's a heck of a lot smarter than me, and so I learned to listen to her. She can read my facial expressions, my tone of voice, and things. So I've been blessed in that aspect.
Yeah, reading people is like one of the most important traits. You
Absolutely, it is, and it's not to say that you're going to guess what they're struggling with. You just
right.
know there's something going on, and can I listen? Would you want to talk to me, or can I find someone that will listen to you? And that's important.
So where do you want to see the organization in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, we've been around. We've been blessed by the good Lord to be around here. Starting with CSFF in 2009. So we're into our 14th year. Uh, where I'd really like to see is we don't get a lot of funding, and so it becomes very difficult because our weekend retreat, our annual weekend retreat, runs us anywhere between 18 to 20,000, and when you don't get a lot of funding, in fact, hardly any, except for some private donations from people or organizations, it becomes very difficult. So we have to charge for workshops, not a lot, but we have to charge so that we can keep our operations. What I'd love to see is some type of funding, like the major organizations get out there in the fire service, so that we can offer free workshops, we can offer free weekend retreats, and things like that. Because behavioral health is not going to go away. And until they figure out how to have robots do our world, it's suicides aren't going to go away either. So we just want to keep on going, keep on promoting. We've, even though I've traveled well over 800,000 air miles the last 10 years, we have a long ways to go. And plus, this is a global issue. And what makes us different than any other organization out there is that two things. And one is the data. And then the other one is that 90% of all our workshops come from our brothers and sisters. In 2017, my wife and I hooked up our truck and camper, and we traveled across the U.S. We were gone for over a year, and we put on over 40,000 miles. We were stopping at volunteer departments, dispatch centers, EMS organizations, and just talking to people, handing out our tip cards, and let them know that behavioral health is a vital aspect of any department. And we need to start training in our academies. We need to start training our officers. But one aspect that I see 2023, we are about to come out with our white paper. And our white paper it's my first one. And I don't write it. I have a good friend, Liz Fletcher. She's a professor out of Houston. Because if you ever read a white paper, it's pretty professionally written. And I speak from the heart, and I write from the heart. So I can't write a white paper. So we're working on that together, along with Chaplain Mark out of Rush Memorial, who runs the moral injury unit at Rush Memorial. And so we are working on this white paper, and it should be out fairly soon. And it was all on the premise that I believe that moral injury plays a larger role, if not larger role, than PTS. Right. And so look for that to come out.